Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the tragedy, the visual genius, and those incredibly poetic final moments of one of Bleach's most complex and honestly, deeply misunderstood characters. We're deconstructing Gin Ichimaru. You know, for years, fans just saw him as this simple villain, right? A creepy antagonist with that permanent, unsettling grin. But as we're going to see, Tite Kubo actually crafted a narrative masterpiece here that goes way beneath the surface. We'll be using an iceberg model to break Gin down, looking at the mask he presented to the world, the hidden motive driving his darkest deeds, and finally the sheer linguistic brilliance of his ultimate martyrdom.
So, let's kick things off by challenging a perception fans held for, what, over 300 episodes? For a massive chunk of Bleach, Gin was literally the guy you love to hate. He betrayed the Soul Society, he teamed up with the ultimate big bad, Sosuke Aizen, and he just seemed to absolutely revel in psychologically torturing our heroes. But then, the Urankar arc happened. The devastating truth of his story dropped, and the fandom experienced this collective heartbreak. It forces us to ask a really difficult question. Was Gin Ichimaru just a traitor, or was he actually a prisoner of his own tragic design?
Section 1. The Mask. Visual Trope Deconstruction.
To really understand Gin, we've got to start right at the surface with the physical mask he wore to deceive everyone in the Soul Society. Now, if you watch a lot of anime, you have absolutely seen this face before. It's called Kitsune no Me, which translates to fox's eyes or shifty eyes. It's this classic visual storytelling device, where a character's eyes are drawn as simple slits or arcs so they look perpetually closed. Tite Kubo deliberately used this design to instantly signal to us that Gin was a secretive snake who absolutely could not be trusted. It's a brilliant shorthand, right? Without Gin speaking a single word, his design screams, "I am hiding something and I am dangerous."
And what's so cool is how Kubo completely subverts our baseline expectations with this. Think about characters like Brock from Pokémon, where the closed eyes are mostly just for comic obliviousness, or Ling Yao from Fullmetal Alchemist, who rocks the squint to look like a goofy, harmless nice guy. But Gin? He weaponizes the trope. His closed eyes and that permanent smile don't hide a goofy interior at all. They hide absolute lethal intent. Kubo builds up this crazy aura of terror around those super rare moments when Gin finally drops the mask and opens those piercing blue eyes. Because let's be real, when his eyes open, someone is usually about to die.
Section 2. The Motive. The Duality of Gin.
So what exactly was he hiding behind that mask? The most fascinating part here is the massive contrast between the monster he projected outwardly and the insane 4D chess he was secretly playing right under Sosuke Aizen's nose. On the surface, he totally committed to the bit of being a monster. I mean, he famously broke Rukia's spirit right before her execution just for the fun of it, offering her a fake lifeline only to brutally snatch it away. But behind the scenes, he was actively undermining Aizen the entire time. He manipulated the corridors in Las Noches to give Ichigo's team a fighting chance, he allowed Rukia closure, he pushed Chad to evolve, and he was constantly throwing wrenches into Aizen's plans. He desperately wanted our protagonist to succeed, but he had to act just evil enough to keep Aizen's trust. And it was all for one single, heartbreaking reason. Gin dedicated his entire existence, literally centuries of his life, to a solitary mission: getting back the soul fragment that Aizen stole from his childhood love, Rengoku Matsumoto, back when they were just kids. Gin happily branded himself as a traitor. He completely threw away his own chance at happiness, leaving Rengoku's side at her absolute lowest point. He falsely believed that walking this incredibly lonely path of vengeance was the only way to protect her and return what was stolen.
Which brings us to what is arguably one of the most famous and gut-wrenching quotes in all of Bleach, spoken by Gin right as he's dying. "If tomorrow you were to turn into a snake, and you began devouring humans, and with that same mouth you said you loved me, would I still be able to say I love you the same way as I do today?" On the surface, yeah, it sounds like he's asking Rangiku a question, but the thing is, he never actually says this out loud to her. He's just thinking it. The crucial takeaway here is that he isn't asking Rangiku, he is swapping the roles. Kubo consistently portrayed Gin as the snake, so here, Gin is tragically asking himself if he even deserves Rangiku's love after the unspeakable horrors he willingly committed over decades just to achieve his goal.
And this exposes a super harsh truth about his character arc. Vengeance is a complete dead end. Through his ultimate failure to kill Aizen, we see Kubo's masterful message that revenge destroys the exact thing you're trying to protect. Blinded by this mission, Gin completely ignored what Rangiku actually needed, which was really just him right by her side. He destroyed his own mortals, embraced the identity of a cold-blooded murderer, and, well, in the harsh reality of the Bleach universe, that kind of vengeance is never rewarded. He dies having caused the love of his life immense pain, and he doesn't even fulfill the promise he made to himself to kill Aizen.
Section 3. The Martyr. The nuance of passing on.
All right, let's dive to the absolute deepest layer of the iceberg to look at the profound linguistic genius happening here. As Jin is bleeding out on the ground, having just had his arm literally ripped off by a god-tier Aizen, Ichigo Kurosaki suddenly arrives. Gin looks at Ichigo, sees this intense, newfound resolve in his eyes, and thinks this final line, "Your eyes have grown strong. That's good. As you are now, I can entrust everything to you and pass on." It's this beautiful passing of the torch. But the true, heavy weight of this moment, it completely lies in the original Japanese text. You've got to notice the final verb he chooses to use. So in Japanese, there are several ways you can say to die. You've got shinu, which is just your common, everyday neutral term. Then you have nakunaru, which is a softer, more polite way to say to pass away. But Gin, he doesn't use either of those. Gin uses the verb sogeru. Now this is a highly formal, archaic, and elevated term historically reserved for the deaths of nobility and emperors. By specifically using this ancient verb sogeru, Gin frames his own death not as the pathetic tragedy of some failed villain, but as a deliberate, controlled, and almost noble sacrifice.
And what makes this linguistic choice so incredibly staggering is how it connects to the wider universe. In later lore, stuff that gets expanded on in the light novels, we find out that the specific soul fragment Aizen stole from Rangiku actually belonged to the Soul King, as in the literal god of this universe. This subtly and perfectly aligns with Jin's use of that royal, elevated vocabulary in his final moments. He was literally fighting a war over a piece of the divine. Now, whether Kubo planned this from day one, or if it just aligned beautifully in hindsight with the later material, this linguistic choice completely elevates Jin's demise into an act of supreme narrative respect. He wasn't just a snake, he was a tragic knight, fighting a solitary, totally impossible crusade.
Which brings us to a final question I really want you to think about. If you sacrifice your soul, your morals, and your entire life to avenge the one you love, only to leave them behind weeping over your shattered body, was the vengeance ever truly worth the price? I want to leave you with that final, heartbreaking thought about the smiling snake of the Soul Society, because Genichimaru's story challenges all of us to consider the devastating cost of living solely for revenge, a path that ultimately alienated him from the exact person he swore to protect. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and honestly, I hope you look at this incredible character with entirely new eyes.